Welcome back to another episode of Art World Confessions. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than what you're accustomed seeing on Art World Confessions, but it's still my life and it's still my experience, and I'm going to tell you what I learned recently about working at Micro1. I've worked in art all my life. I recently started working with the estate of Jan Urs, so keep an eye out for exhibitions of his tapestries, photographs, paintings, drawings, and sculpture. Here you'll see a few places that his work has been placed. So although I love art, recently I have been exploring change in the field of artificial intelligence. You probably know quite a bit about what's happening in the industry just from reading the news every single day. So I was working recently with this company called Micro1, and I was working in Robotics Data Collection. I was working from October to February on a robotics data collection project, which really brought me a lot of joy. I mean, some of the most fun times for me was seeing some things that didn't fit into the guidelines at all, that just came out of left field, things that, really remind you that human beings can really never be defeated, just like the internet is undefeated. Because of confidentiality, I can't speak about the project, but according to the person in marketing that I spoke to at Micro1, I can speak generally about my experience working there. Everything I say in this video is my own opinion, and I never say anything without having the receipts. Same thing as when I worked on the project. Everything I talked about there, every decision I made was backed up by the facts, verifiable facts. So everything I say here about my experience working with Micro1 is verifiable because I have the receipts. So in October, I was hired for this project, and after a series of conflicting messages about how I would start working, I eventually started working in November. I was the first person to introduce the reimbursement plan for equipment, which has now become the norm. At Micro1, you get paid well and on time. I'm pretty sure I know where the money's coming from based on what's happening in social media and what's happening in AI. I mean, there's a lot of news about where people's philanthropic funds are going these days. I can't really say more, but I'm pretty sure I know who the benefactor is, so to speak, on this project. There's a lot of tech backup. You always have everything you need in terms of engineering done really quickly. No art, no creativity, no real ideas. But if you have an idea, they can execute it very well. After I started, a new person was hired to build a team. Let's just call this person Bubble Tea, just for fun and for shits and giggles. And this person was brought on after I started. And they were very good at befriending all the people who were there before, sort of like scoping things out and starting to ask questions, extracting information and ideas. Then when I was being passed over later on, because I was arguably being harassed by someone dumber than me, and I stood up for myself and I demanded recognition for the contributions that I had done on this project, instead of disciplining the guy who was harassing me, I was removed from the project. So this human data manager was definitely out to get me. Once he was discussing on the main Slack channel something about, again, this is perhaps confidential information, but there was something that I discovered while working on the project, that this person took it upon themselves to point out one specific contributor to the project who was carrying on this infraction. And after I called him out on it, which I saw as targeting, this person of color from another country, this person then decided, this human data manager, that when he was promoted, dumber than me, but hey, it seems like most people there who are not challenging anything in the status quo, those are the ones who are promoted. So once he was promoted, he decided to help me, quote unquote, help me by telling me what was not working in my reviews. Mind you, I've done over 5,000 reviews on that platform. So just imagine if every human data manager had to give me feedback on 5,000 of the reviews that I've done. Nobody else had really done that except perhaps one or two people, and actually one or two from the same person, another data manager who came on pretty much the same time as the person who led the project. So this abrupt dismissal came after the founder of the company and also the VP of Human Data is on record saying in the meetings that were conducted, the very few meetings that we did have, that if experts aren't really getting the project, or if people have a problem, they will give them a chance, give them warnings, and give them a chance to course correct. This didn't happen with me. Within 24 hours of getting a Slack message with false accusations of work shortcomings, I was locked out of the platform and removed from all of the channels. I got an email later that evening, some sort of ChatGPT crafted termination. I mean, it was very, very bizarre. If you ask me what happened, considering that I had been working on this project almost every day for 3 months and contributing all round to the creation of the platform and the policies regarding the entire program, if you ask me what was wrong, I think I actually knew too much. I think I was doing way too much, and that wasn't very good for the new people who were hired. When you're dealing with fragile male egos, insecure people, I suppose you have to somehow pussyfoot around them and not really shine your light, not let other people know just how smart you actually are. So the new head honcho, let's call him Bubble Tea, he would rather promote an inferior but non-threatening employee over an excellent, popular one. When this happens in companies in general, mediocrity is promoted over excellence and best results are sacrificed for executive control. I would say it was obvious from the start, and the robotics field in America is so new. They have no clue what they're doing. But by trial and error and using people like me who give their ideas freely, they'll probably get where they're going, I guess. In general, there was a lot of back and forth about everything. Day-to-day policies being implemented and removed. Meetings, when they did happen, were often last minute. Last-minute huddles with the boss were common, almost like he wanted the least number of team members to show up. There's zero training. Just a list of ever-changing guidelines that if you missed a day of work, you wouldn't be up to date with. Well, I never missed a day of work, so I was always up to date with everything. And that was probably part of the problem too, because very often I knew things which the so-called human data managers had no clue about because they didn't work as much as I did, and they certainly didn't know as much. I'm not going to say I did everything to help develop the program, but I certainly was the one who suggested designing the platform in certain ways which were immediately adopted. I suggested how the platform should work so that the tasks that were being given to reviewers like myself would be somehow fairly shared. I gave a lot of ideas which, without me giving the feedback, I doubt they would have been in place. Whenever I had an idea and I offered it publicly on the Slack channel, my clearly insecure superior would say, I had that idea too, but there was always a but. These guys, they think in a certain way. They're trained to think in a certain way. They have their numbers, they have their charts, they have their so-called data. They can't think outside of that box. And anyone who is thinking outside of that box, they really value, but it makes them realize their own shortcomings. So after I complained about this human data manager who was messaging me, the last day of work, there must have been like 3 guys in my inbox. I have no idea, all this mansplaining, as if I actually needed them to help me with anything. So there was the guy again writing me a second message about my reviews. Then there was another guy writing me a disciplinary email, which I said, okay, you're disciplining me about these things. Give me examples. Again, whenever I put something out there in the Slack channels, I always had backup for what I was saying. This random email coming out of nowhere telling me that, I should watch myself basically had no examples of what I did wrong, no backup to show me where things could be fixed. And I forwarded that to the VP of Human Data. Nothing came of it. whatever he said in meetings regarding course correction and helping people work and do better, all just empty words. I think it's safe to say, because it's been in the press, the recent public announcement that Micro1 will work exclusively with US labs. It's an interesting step considering the current political situation in the US with certain countries and with certain policies about people from certain countries. And I don't know, but it made me think. What was very weird, and which tells me that I was definitely onto something, is that Bubble Tea had the idea to start a new Slack channel. Like, he wanted to get rid of everything that was on the old channel. I asked, are all of the things that were saved going to move to the new Slack channel? And he was like, no. So there was stuff on that channel which they didn't want to be brought into the new area. And that included me. I couldn't be brought into the new area, the new Slack channel, because I had way too much information about the project and what was going on in the project, for good and for bad. Yeah, Bubble Tea came into the project, supposedly to build teams, but really what he did was get rid of anyone who didn't fall into the loyalty line, I'll say, and follow his whatever he says blindly. You couldn't question. And I think any place you work that you're not allowed to bring up creative questions is a place that cannot in any way, shape, or form actually grow in a healthy fashion. Part of the gang is a humanoid bot which speaks exclusively through ChatGPT. I mean, sometimes whatever they were putting out there was so completely incomprehensible. I was thinking to myself, maybe they should just run it through ChatGPT a third time. Maybe they could get some sense out of it so that we could understand what in God's good earth that person was saying. A big push in the press as well, and in the hyping up of the, I guess you'd call them the experts, is this concept of universality in the company, it being a global company. But the reality is a lot of cultural ignorance and intolerance. I mean, so many of the policies that they were putting in had absolutely no reference at all to the reality of the everyday lives of the people who are contributing this data. All I can say is, after my complaints about that person who I saw as harassing me, not to mention the other two guys who were showing up on the last day in my inbox, if you complain about someone, you're not going to be in any ways taken seriously. At least from my experience, white males will always be protected over a black female, always, no matter how dumb or wrong the man is. And that's exactly what happened. Instead of disciplining the man, they decided to get rid of me, the person who was complaining about the man. The ChatGPT generated email that was sent explaining my termination made it clear that my position was no longer needed because the whole system was changing, but which wasn't true, because up till that week they were still hiring people in the role of reviewer. So what they were saying as the reason for my termination, again, was a lie. So the reprimanding email, which was sent the morning of my termination, full of lies, and then the termination email full of lies. So no one had any way, shape, or form a thought in their head how they would make things better. They just wanted to get rid of me, and I think I know why. I mean, there were human data managers. You could see they had no idea what was going on. I would make a comment to help someone out in the Slack channel, and you would see the human data manager edit their response to mirror what I had said in the Slack channel. It was just bizarre. Even people who worked there were like, well, what's going on? All these other people are getting promoted. How come you're not? They didn't understand it. I didn't understand it either. But I'm sure Bubble Tea understood it. And he made sure that I saw that everyone else was being promoted before terminating me and getting me off of the channel. So this sort of cruelty, this sort of pettiness is what really pushed me over the edge. Like, I don't care if you're an a-hole by yourself, but don't be mean, don't be nasty. And that's exactly what showed me his true character at the end of this whole scenario. It really reminded me that in terms of business, we need to stop as a society supporting psychopaths. Whether it's at Micro1, whether it's at a company like Palantir, whether it's a Tesla, wherever we see psychopaths in society, they should be barred from polite society. We should not support them in any way, shape, or form. So I didn't mention who I spoke to, but I went straight to the top to complain about this guy, what was happening, and why I felt I was being targeted by him. And the Persian cats, they didn't help. They just went on purring, business as usual. So up till the time I'm recording this, I still haven't been paid for the last week of work. I wrote an email to the head of the department, as well as to the person in charge of the group or the project, whatever you want to call him. But they were like, oh, it's been approved, just keep an eye out. Nothing. So I still haven't been paid for the last days since the last pay cycle. Not cool. Yeah, they tell you, when you're going into these programs, there are lots of these leadership programs and stuff which they promote to help you understand the industry and where it's going and to understand the company. Those are great. But, they say a lot of things again which no one ever really follows up on. Like they'll say, oh, email me, and if you have any ideas or if you want to introduce someone, blah, blah. You do that, and then what happens? Crickets. Maybe a couple weeks later, you'll get a response, and then goes nowhere. So again, just people talking off the top of their head, but what they say isn't what they do. And that is not a great thing. Yeah, at the end of the day, I feel like I was punished for being excellent. That's how it works in America. You could call it the tall poppy syndrome. When mediocre people, they would have you dim your light to accommodate their inferiority. And I wasn't in any way, shape, or form planning to dim my light to accommodate a bunch of techies out there. A friend of mine in art, a curator, recently he said to me, oh, I would like to change fields. I would like to somehow make a contribution somewhere else. I've worked in art all my life. And that's exactly how I felt. So, of course, I recommended him to Micro1. But now I realize that perhaps I'm going to start recommending people to other companies. Valuable human data can go somewhere else. Let them get the PhDs at Micro1. All of those degrees have their limitations. As it is now, I'm looking for a lawyer to explore the possibility of how I could sue Micro1 for employment infractions. So if there are any lawyers out there who think I might have a case, I have a timeline and everything, which I think would be useful information. You can send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll put my profile link in the body of this email. And be in touch. So that's it for today, folks. Comment down below and tell me what your experience was really like working at Micro1.